Hello. This week we look at number 2 in our series on managing for the Master. This one's entitled God's Covenants with Us. And you'll know from previous studies that this whole aspect of covenants I find can be a very problematic one because we tend to bring it down to some kind of legal agreement. And I think that's the exact opposite of what God really wants. He doesn't want any kind of legal agreement with us. He speaks to us in words we can understand, yes, and sometimes we want to have some kind of signed on the dotted line God to promise us exactly what we want because we are very distrustful people. We don't trust in others and we don't trust in God. Maybe that's the problem. We write down things in a covenant to make sure that the other person fulfills their obligations. And you go and talk to any lawyer, their life work, as it were, in many cases is dealing with these kinds of covenants, whether it's a house transfer or property of some kind or money and so on. As I say, I think that can be a major problem. Let's look again, though, at some of the material we're given in our biblical material for this time. Jesus promises that those who endure to the end will be saved. Matthew 10:22. It's a promise. Is that a covenant? Did he sign it? No, we just trust Jesus because he said so. Jesus says in John 6:29 that what God most wants is for us to trust the one that he sent. And he lays out in Deuteronomy 28 the results of what will happen if his people do or do not trust and follow him. And in Proverbs 3, it talks about those who trust in God, and complains in Malachi 3 about the people who've defrauded him in tithes and offerings. And then lastly, in Matthew 6, Jesus tells us not to worry about material possessions, clothing, or what to eat or drink. So all those property-based, object-based aspects of the contract aren't really important, says Jesus. Don't worry about your material possessions, your clothing, what you're going to eat or drink. God is going to take care of you. And we're tending to say, well, I want to see that written down. I want that promise to be guaranteed. And I don't know what kind of sanctions you're going to apply, because usually covenants come with sanctions for those who don't obey what's required in the covenant. So I would rather, if you don't mind, and please humour me on this, let's just toss the covenant word. I don't use it in the Free Bible version because I want to talk about God's promises and the fact that he gives us those promises out of the kindness of his heart, not because he's obligated by some covenant that he's made to do so. So that's where I want to begin. And then I want to take you to some of those thoughts from Ellen White, because she talks about covenants, yes, but look at what she calls this covenant. She calls it a covenant of grace. Nothing but the righteousness of Christ can entitle us to one of the blessings of the covenant of grace. The covenant of grace is not a new truth, for it existed in the mind of God from all eternity. That's why it's called the everlasting covenant, and so on. We have God's pledge that he will bind men closely to his great heart of infinite love in the bonds of the new covenant of grace. This is far different from some piece of paper that we pick up and we sign, and there are requirements and demands and penalties for failing to observe them. I'm not saying that you can't use certain aspects of that in the relationship with God. We expect some things from God, and God expects some things for us in return. But it's far more the promises of friend to friend than going down to your local lawyer's office and signing some kind of piece of paper, don't you think? So, as you think about what we're going to be talking about in terms of these covenants that God makes with us, let's really concentrate on the God who promises all that he does for us and for our benefit.